hardest things about working with folks with mental health issues is getting them to really stick with something like diet. So people who have trauma, and that's one of the things that I've been teaching for years too, is how to treat trauma. It is just one of the most devastating things, and it leads to lifelong problems with anxiety and depression. Folks who have those kind of illnesses, it's hard for them to focus on what's going on in the moment. So focusing on what they're eating, focusing on exercise, all that stuff, it's really a long, arduous process. I had one woman who bought the Vitamix and she didn't even plug it in for a year. So the hardest part about getting folks with mental health to improve on a plant-based diet is getting them the motivation to do it. So when I have someone who's motivated, the results are remarkable. But the hard part is getting people to do it. Whereas people who have physical ailments, it's usually not the same thing. You know, for example, I had somebody, I was the medical director for a youth program at a nonprofit in Long Beach, California for 5 years. And I just loved working with that group. It was 18 to 25-year-olds that were, they graduated from foster care or juvenile justice, or they were on the streets. And so these were a really sick group of kids. And they were kids to me. I absolutely adored working with them. But one of the biggest things I saw what was wrong was when they would get some money in their hands and we would help them, you know, to be able to eat, the first thing they would do is get an energy drink and a bag of Cheetos. And then they'd tell me, I can't sleep, I can't focus, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, you know, and it was just, well, your brain is not functioning, you know, and so I actually worked hard to bring nutrition to them. And they told me, the director at the time told me that wasn't gonna happen, that these kids don't care about nutrition. I said, they don't because we're not showing them it's important. And when people, what happened is because they were still young, and especially psychologically, they were traumatized and they were much younger than their age, they were looking for parents, they were looking for role models. And when somebody likes you and wants you as a role model, they do what you do. So for me, the ones that really liked me, they started telling me, hey, I went to McDonald's, but I got that salad for $1 and it wasn't that bad, you know. We got a program going with the farmers markets where they were able to use, we used to give Monopoly money kind of stuff for them showing up to classes or for therapy and things. They could use that money not only in the corner store where they were buying their energy drinks, but they could use that money to go to the farmers market and buy fresh fruits and vegetables, and they loved it. And every Friday we would feed them, and it used to be pizza when I showed up. And once they kept seeing me drinking my smoothies, they were curious. We started providing green smoothies with the pizza, and they were drinking those. They were making them and drinking them. And I'm still in touch with a lot of these guys. They contact me on Facebook, and they tell me what they're doing, and it's really become something important to them. So I think it's important that we don't, we don't assume that people don't want to hear it. And I think that's the biggest problem with doctors in general who even know some of this information. They say, you know, for example, we know that you can reverse heart disease with a plant-based diet. We know this. You cannot do it with medication, but you can do it with plant-based diet. And when they ask doctors, why don't you teach people this? They say they don't think people are going to want to do it. It's too difficult. So, well, let them be the judge of that. I think it's too difficult to go under the knife and have my chest cracked open, you know, but give people the chance, the opportunity, you know, and don't assume that it's not information that they want. So one of the kids that I was working with, one of the youth that I was working with, he was about 20 years old, and he had psychosis. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he was so paranoid when he got sick that he couldn't even eat because he thought he was being poisoned. And he had to watch people prepare his food, and he still would rarely ever touch it. He would pace, wondering, thinking somebody was watching him, somebody was after him. He was very sick, and he ended up in the hospital, and he was put on extremely high doses of antipsychotics. And they really overdo it. And I've worked in emergency psychiatry, I've worked inpatient, and the thought is always, well, go high in the hospital so that they can get better faster because they're not going to pay for them to be in the hospital very long, so they need to get them to look stable. And for me, it's not looking stable, but kind of looking like vacant. But they put them on that high dose to get them out of the hospital. And the thought is the outpatient doctor is going to slowly taper them back to a practical dose. But a lot of times that doesn't happen, and people are on these insanely high doses of medication. So he came to me on triple the dose of antipsychotics that I would expect. And you know, he's a young black male, and actually young black males have the highest rate of side effects that can cause Parkinson's. They have the highest rate of developing Parkinson's-like symptoms from antipsychotics. It's a very dangerous thing to do to this young guy. So what my goal was really to get him down to a more practical level that was going to have less risk for him. And I also, like everyone else, I talked to him about diet. And at the time, I just read a beautiful article that was showing that dairy dairy, milk protein, was a trigger for psychosis and voices. And I told him about that, and he's a very smart guy, and he was very interested in it. And so he decided to give it a go and to go plant-based. And what he did was he gave up dairy, he gave up meat. The only thing he had was fish once a week, but other than that, he just ate lots of fruits and vegetables, and he went to the gym every day. And his voices went away completely, to the point that we were able to take him off the antipsychotics, and the voices were gone. It was the most incredible thing. I still get goosebumps when I talk about it. I've never seen that happen before. And it was the most remarkable thing. And actually, he was doing fantastic. And he went on a camping trip. Months later, went on a camping trip, and all weekend they had just barbecue, meat, and burgers with cheese and processed chips and all that stuff. And he ate what was there, and he came back psychotic again. All of his symptoms came back, and he actually ended up in the hospital. And when he came out, we were able to have that conversation where he really saw how powerful what he ate was. It was really dramatic to see that. So while it's really, really difficult to have someone with psychosis able to really understand and to go along with a change in their diet, it's so important to try and to give them that chance. You know, the reason that I wanted to go into medicine is I just really, really wanted to help people not suffer. I know that I'd been sick for a lot of my life, but I didn't suffer because I had a purpose and I had a focus. And for me, it was really powerful to see that you can have disease, but you can also have purpose. Suffering is really more about not accepting what you've got or about making it your identity. And I never really accepted that I'm a lupus sufferer. You know, it wasn't who I was. It was just kind of an inconvenience, painful inconvenience, but it wasn't my identity. And I really wanted to help people kind of be able to manage their disease, minimize their suffering, and still embrace their lives. And so that was what really pulled me to medicine. And for me also, the suffering aspect was so huge. I actually, at 14 years old, I saw my grandfather, the Holocaust survivor who'd worked so hard to get to this country, survived the Nazis, survived so much, came to this country, worked with his hands, made himself a living, finally retired, became shuffleboard champion, you know, of his community, his retirement community, and then developed cancer. And I watched him get so sick, and it took him 2 years to die because they aggressively went after it with chemotherapy, even though they knew it was terminal. It was in his bones, it was in all of his organs. He wasn't going to make it, and his doctor wouldn't give up. He just kept giving him more chemo. And when my mom asked, well, maybe we should stop the chemo, the doctor actually said to her, well, then it will be your fault that he dies if you stop the medication. And yeah, I know that he was doing his best, because we all do. But it was just, my mother couldn't handle that, you know, when he said that. And so we let him continue, and he wanted to continue as well. But it took 2 years of suffering. And the second year of it, he couldn't even get out of bed. Half the time he thought I was my mother. But I stayed with my grandmother, and I helped her take care of him. I helped him go to the bathroom. I helped feed him. And I just saw it take away who he was. And so I thought that was really important too, where I could see even then how the ego of the doctor can affect the suffering of the patient. And you know, doctors, we tend to be kind of overachievers. And when we start to think that success with a patient means that they're still alive, we lose out on the humanity part. Because sometimes success means that we help them find the right time to go, and we help them go with peace and with dignity. And so that was really important to me too, is that when you have illness, you're not just a problem to be solved, you're a whole person, you have a family, you have this whole world that's yours, and we have to help them not only minimize their suffering, but preserve their dignity and their sense of purpose as well.